Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today for this important discussion. If you've been following the news, you may have heard about President Trump's recent executive order directing major law firms to provide free legal services to defend police officers accused of misconduct. So if you've been following the news, you know that major law firms were being threatened with various things like loss of contracts, loss of security clearances, unless they agreed to certain terms and conditions. And these law firms agreed to offer pro bono services. And now, you know, they are basically being told to defend police officers accused of misconduct. And this is a concerning thing for a number of reasons. A lot of police officers who are in find themselves in a situation where they're accused of misconduct, they typically have a defense already. Um, Really, the issue is if someone wants to bring a complaint, do they have access to resources to bring that complaint? Because when they bring that complaint, it's usually the police that are investigating themselves, or it might be another law enforcement agency that's conducting the investigation. To have private counsel to do that for you, that's what a lot of the law firms used to do. They used to have pro bono departments that would um, investigate civil rights violations, and if there were some merits and claims that could be brought, then their big law associates would be bringing those claims in the interest of making policing better and raising the quality and standards of policing. And it's an interesting time that this is happening because the Supreme Court is currently hearing a case about whether the FBI can be sued for raiding the wrong house. And so this conversation couldn't be more timely. Today I'm going to break down what Trump's executive order means for civil rights cases, which law firms have given in to his demands, and how you can still find quality legal representation, and exactly what you need to do to bring forward a strong case. As an attorney that I primarily have a background in criminal law, I did prosecution for a number of years, and now I represent injured people in personal injury cases, but also a variety of situations that, sometimes I get consulted with civil rights violations as well. And the concerning part about these cases is that it takes on a significant amount of time and resources to do them. And so by taking the law firms that have those resources and directing them to defend the officers that already have a defense, it kind of sucks the resources out from people who would bring these cases normally. Um, the executive order directs the Department of Justice to mobilize law firms to defend police officers accused of misconduct for free. That's interesting. Oftentimes government lawyers are responsible to defend the government agencies. They already have lawyers on the payroll to do this work. So this augments that, and I don't know if that means that the cops are going to get a better defense, or they're just going to have private lawyers do the defense for them, and that frees up the Justice Department to do other work. This seems to be a broader strategy that is basically flipping the tables. These are the law firms that would normally sue President Trump or sue the police officers. Now they're turning around and defending them. And it's basically moving more chips towards the executive branch. And it's a very concerning development. These are the law firms that traditionally handled important civil rights cases. For example, Paul Weiss agreed to provide $40 million in free legal services to causes that Trump supports, and this is one of them. And Skadden Arps preemptively struck a deal for $100 million in pro bono services, which is kind of wild to me that law firms would preemptively do this. Willkie Farr, Milbank, and others have made similar arrangements. And why this matters, these firms have been, like I said before, instrumental in taking on major civil rights cases in the past. Paul Weiss, for example, was involved in fighting against family separations at the border and even received awards for their work against hate and extremism. And after their deal with Trump, they actually took down their Center to Combat Hate website and removed information about their civil rights work. This potentially creates a huge conflict of interest. The firms that used to represent the people harmed by the police might now be representing those same officers. It's a major shift in how legal resources are allocated in our justice system. But the great thing about America is that there's tons of lawyers out there. So finding legal representation about after the big firm exodus is still possible. So if these, I know what you're thinking. If you're in a situation like this, if the big firms won't help you anymore, what are you supposed to do? There are many dedicated civil rights attorneys who can provide excellent representation in boutique firms. Some of the most successful police misconduct litigation comes from these specialized boutique firms because that is a lot of what they do. And so there are some options to consider out there. Specialized civil rights firms like Lovey and Lovey, the Civil Rights Litigation Group, the Cochran Firm, they all specialize exclusively in civil rights cases and have impressive track records. There's firms like the Feiger Law in Michigan. They've won record-breaking verdicts in police misconduct cases, including a $56.5 million verdict and a jail death sentence. And then there's local civil rights attorneys. Every major city has attorneys who have built their careers fighting police misconduct. One of my friends, Edward Sutterwalla, they have been doing police misconduct and civil rights work for some time. And they often know the local court system and police department better than big national law firms because they frequently are suing them and dealing with their county level government or their city counterparts. When looking for an attorney, it's important to ask about their specific experience with police misconduct cases and their track record of taking the cases to trial rather than settling quickly. Um, just from my experience working in the government and seeing these cases, often the initial offer is either the initial offers are going to deny responsibility or they're going to give you a really small amount of money, like maybe $1,000 to go away. And and what they tell you is that you either take this $1,000 or we go to court, we're going to just dismiss your case and you'll get nothing. And for a lot of attorneys that work on contingency, you only get paid if many of them work only if they get paid to win. They don't want to take that risk, so it's better to go with a firm that understands the viability of your case, and they can tell you if it's worth taking that chance or not. And they're more willing to take that chance because they've done that kind of work before. So, how do you build a strong case? A lot of cases are just built on the facts. Good facts are important. They tell a good story that resonates both with, the jury, the judge, and the public in general. Um, First of all, I think when you're dealing with a civil rights violation, obviously you need to document everything immediately. You need to seek medical attention for your injuries. You need to take photographs of all the injuries, even as they continue to heal. You got to write everything when you remember it while it's fresh. You need to keep a journal. A lot of people don't keep journals. It's a great habit to have, even if you're not in the middle of litigation. You want to look for and you want to preserve any video evidence in places that you might not think about. If you didn't take video, maybe somebody else, a bystander had it. You got to find out who those people are. Even if you're injured and you can't do it, you need to be able to have other people do it for you. You got to get that contact information from the witnesses. I know it's hard. I know a lot of cases don't have this evidence, and that's why a lot of cases don't prevail, which is another point about police misconduct, is that many times it's not documented well, or at least it hadn't been until body-worn cameras became a thing. And so thankfully nowadays in many states, you have the ability to get body-worn camera footage from the departments, but again, that may not come for a while. They might resist production, or they may claim it's not there, so it's better if you have your own recordings of what's happening. So after you gather your information, the next thing is you really simultaneously at the same time, you need to file formal complaints. A complaint creates an official record your attorney can use later. And in many cases, you have to file that complaint within a certain period of time, depending on the local entity that you're suing, whether it's a city officer, a county officer, state officer, federal officer. You got to make a complaint by a certain deadline, otherwise you lose that claim. And it's not necessarily, it's going to be earlier, many times earlier than the statute of limitations in your case. Typically, there's a point of contact. Your police department's internal affairs division might have it. You file with civilian oversight boards if your city has one. And then for serious violations, more serious than maybe, I'm trying to think of what would constitute a very serious violation. For example, death would be probably one of the most serious ones. File with your state attorney Attorney General. For a constitutional violation, he would file with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. But again, the Department of Justice is being tasked by the executive order to defend these very same police officers. So even there, it seems to create somewhat of a conflict here. You want to keep copies of everything and get reference numbers. You want to follow up regularly with the status of your complaints. Sometimes these complaints get filed, and if you don't do anything, there's no incentive by the government to react. The third step is you got to understand the legal landscape you're operating in. Police officers are protected by qualified immunity, and that's probably something that you've heard. You may have heard of sovereign immunity. There's qualified immunity that protects police officers, and it shields them from lawsuits unless they violate clearly established rights. This is a major hurdle. It's not impossible to overcome. As I mentioned before, the Supreme Court is currently hearing a case that might impact this. There's a family in Atlanta suing the FBI. It's suing after the FBI raided their home by mistake in 2017. The FBI used flashbang grenades, held them at gunpoint, and traumatized their 7-year-old son, all because agents didn't properly check the address before the raid. Now, they've been arguing, I think the argument was either earlier today or yesterday. One of the things I heard about the argument is that they were arguing that it was part of the discretionary function of officers to do this, and really, in my view, it looks like it was an operational issue and not a discretionary issue. But this could potentially open new avenues for holding federal law enforcement accountable, which might eventually impact state and local police accountability as well. And I think that would be a positive development. I think government accountability is important. I think, there's so many traps that people fall into where the government is not held accountable because you don't follow proper procedure, you don't investigate the claim well enough. It's designed, the laws are designed to protect the government, to protect taxpayers from frivolous lawsuits, but many times legitimate concerns go unheard, and a lot of bureaucracies are reluctant to change unless there's some kind of instigating force to do it, and that typically comes through lawsuits. So anyways, right now the legal landscape for holding police accountability is changing rapidly and not necessarily for the better. This executive order redirecting major law firm resources away from civil rights plaintiffs, they're not saying it's away, they're saying to protect police officers, but these same law firms would normally be pursuing these civil rights cases. This presents challenges. The legal system is still there for you, though. There are still judges that strike down these executive orders. There are still victories out there. So finding a specialized civil rights attorney fighting these cases is important. If you've ever experienced this in your life, police misconduct, I wouldn't wait to act. Document everything, file the formal complaints, reach out to civil rights attorneys as soon as possible. Just reach out to any attorney that you know. Many attorneys know who these people are, and I'd be happy to refer you to an appropriate civil rights attorney, whether it's in Texas or California or nationwide. I've put together 2 free resources to help you, a comprehensive guide to finding civil rights attorneys, and then a checklist for building a police misconduct case. You can download both in the description below. And if you found this, I'm learning how to do this on YouTube. If you found this information helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content regarding, legal developments and analysis. If you have questions or comments, drop them in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to protecting your rights.